Closing her eyes to die, she opened them and saw a human holding her. The warning lights flashed red across the cockpit. Kurazeth watched them with the calm acceptance that her people were famous for. Her ship was dying, and soon she would be too. She was a scout pilot for the Valkyrian explorer fleet. Her species had smooth, crystalline skin that reflected light like polished glass. They were known throughout the galaxy for being logical, intelligent, and completely controlled. Emotions were something the Valkyrians had removed from their culture 300 years ago. They called it the Great Refinement. Feelings were messy, unpredictable, and inefficient. Logic was better. Right now, logic told Kurazeth that she had approximately 18 minutes to live. Her ship had been caught in a debris field near an uncharted moon. The navigation systems failed first, then the shields. Pieces of old, broken satellites had torn through her hull like paper. She had tried to steer away, but the damage was too severe. The ship had spiraled down toward the moon's surface, completely out of her control. The crash had been rough. Her ship now lay on its side, half buried in gray dust. The metal groaned and creaked around her. Sparks flew from broken panels. The air inside smelled wrong, like burning plastic and something bitter. Kurazeth unbuckled her harness with shaking hands. Her left arm was injured and there was a sharp pain in her side. But she could move. She had to get out. The ship's reactor was unstable. It wouldn't explode. Valkyrian ships were designed too well for that, but it would stop providing life support soon. She pulled herself through the tilted cockpit. Everything was sideways. Her emergency pack was still attached to the wall, and she grabbed it. Inside was a small oxygen supply, some basic tools, and an emergency beacon. She activated the beacon first. The small device blinked once, twice, then showed a red light. Malfunction. No signal was getting through. Kurazeth calculated her options. The moon's atmosphere was toxic to her species. Her suit had enough oxygen for maybe 2 hours. The nearest Valkyrian outpost was 6 days away at maximum speed. No one knew she was here. The debris field probably blocked any distress signal anyway. Probability of rescue, 0.3%. Probability of survival, even lower. She should have felt fear, but she didn't. Her people had removed that too. Instead, she felt only a quiet understanding. This was simply how her story ended. The mathematics were clear. Kurazeth climbed out of the broken ship. The moon stretched out before her, endless gray dust and dark rocks under a purple sky. 2 distant suns gave everything a strange, dim light. There was no sound except the wind pushing the dust around. She checked her suit's readings. The air outside was definitely toxic. High levels of sulfur compounds and something else her scanner couldn't identify. She looked around for shelter but saw nothing. Just rocks and dust in every direction. Her oxygen meter showed 1 hour and 47 minutes remaining. Kurazeth sat down on a flat rock near her ship. Her arm hurt more now. The pain was increasing as the shock wore off. She opened her emergency pack and found the medical kit. There were bandages and pain medication, but nothing that would help with low oxygen or toxic air. She allowed herself to look at the sky. It was actually quite beautiful in its own way. The purple atmosphere made the sunlight look soft and dreamlike. Stars were already visible even though it wasn't fully dark yet. She recognized some of the constellations. That bright cluster there was the Andara system, where her training academy was located. She had been young then, only 70 years old. Valkyrians lived for 400 years on average. She was 132. She would never reach 133. Her oxygen meter now showed 1 hour and 20 minutes. Kurazeth thought about her family. Her parents were researchers on the homeworld. They would be sad when they heard about her death, in the limited way Valkyrians experienced sadness. It was more like disappointment or recognition of loss. They would calculate what her life might have contributed if she had lived longer, and they would note the statistical tragedy of it. Then they would move forward. That was the Valkyrian way. She had a sister too. Merlin was a teacher in one of the orbital cities. They had talked just 2 weeks ago. Merlin had been telling her about a new curriculum she was developing. Kurazeth wished she could have seen it finished. 53 minutes of oxygen remaining. The wind picked up, blowing dust against her helmet. Kurazeth stood and walked a short distance from the ship. She didn't want to be sitting when the end came. The Valkyrian philosophy was to face death standing, acknowledging it with dignity. Her legs felt weak. The pain in her side was getting worse. She must have injured something important in the crash. Her suit's medical sensors were showing concerning readings, but she dismissed the display. It didn't matter now, 31 minutes of oxygen. She found herself thinking about humans. It was random, but her mind was starting to wander as the oxygen level dropped. She had met humans a few times at trading stations and diplomatic meetings. They were a newer species in the galactic community, only 500 years of space travel. Young and energetic, always asking questions, always curious about everything. The other species found them strange. Humans felt emotions very strongly and didn't seem embarrassed by it. They laughed, cried, got angry, fell in love, all openly. The Valkyrians thought this was primitive. The Thorians thought it was exhausting. The Zephyx thought it was fascinating. Kurazeth had thought it was. She wasn't sure what she thought. Interesting, maybe. Humans seemed to enjoy life in a way other species didn't. They found wonder in simple things. 14 minutes of oxygen. Her vision was getting blurry. The helmet display was hard to read. Her breathing sounded loud in her own ears. She tried to take slower breaths to make the oxygen last, but her body was demanding more air. She sat down again. Standing was too difficult. The purple sky was fading to black at the edges, or maybe that was her vision failing. 5 minutes. Kurazeth closed her eyes. The Valkyrian prayers for the dying were mathematical. They calculated the value of a life, acknowledged the contribution made, and accepted the inevitable return to the elements. She recited the numbers in her head, finding comfort in their precision. 2 minutes. Her breathing was shallow now. She felt cold despite her suit's heating system. This was it, the final calculation, the end of all equations. 1 minute. She kept her eyes closed. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she saw her sister's face. She saw her ship among the stars. She saw the academy where she had studied. She saw... Kurazeth stopped breathing, then something changed. There was warmth, pressure around her body, movement. The sensation of being lifted. It was impossible. She was hallucinating. This was her brain shutting down, creating false sensations, but the warmth continued. And the movement. She was being carried, she could feel it. With tremendous effort, Kurazeth forced her eyes open. She saw a helmet, but not Valkyrian design. The faceplate was closer, and behind it she saw a face. Brown skin, dark eyes filled with concern and an expression of fierce determination. A human was carrying her. Before she could process this impossible fact, darkness took her completely. Kurazeth woke to the sound of a voice. It was speaking words she didn't understand at first. Her translator was offline, giving her only fragments. Okay, breathing now, stay with me. Her chest, her arm, her head. But she was breathing. That was impossible. She had run out of oxygen. She should be dead. That's it. Keep breathing. You're going to be fine. Her translator clicked on fully, and suddenly the words made sense. The voice was speaking Earth Common, the human language. Kurazeth managed to open her eyes. She was lying on something soft inside a small shelter. Lights glowed from panels attached to curved metal walls. The air smelled strange but not unpleasant, like metal and something green, almost like plants. The human was kneeling beside her, looking at a small scanner. He glanced down and saw her eyes open. His face broke into a wide smile. Hey, welcome back. You gave me a real scare there. There was a tiredness in his eyes, but also something bright and alive. Where? Her voice came out as a whisper. Her throat was incredibly dry. Don't try to talk yet, here. He held up a small container with a straw. This is water. Well, mostly water. I added some electrolytes from my emergency supplies. I'm not sure if it's exactly right for your species, but it should help. My name is Marcus Chen, the human said. I'm a salvage operator, or I was before I got stuck on this moon. I saw your ship crash about 3 miles from here. Took me almost an hour to reach you. Carried me. Lucky I upgraded to the extended tank system. Regular tanks wouldn't have lasted for both of us. The probability of both of them surviving that was low. Marcus shrugged. Maybe, but leaving you there wasn't an option. Because you needed help, that's reason enough. He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. This made no logical sense to Kurazeth, but her head hurt too much to analyze it properly. She looked around the shelter instead. It was surprisingly well organized. The walls were made from pieces of different ships. She could identify Thorian hull plating, Zephyx insulation panels, and what looked like parts from an old Earth cargo vessel. Storage containers were stacked neatly along one wall. In another corner, there was a workbench covered with tools and electronic equipment. How long have you been here? She asked. 3 months, 1 week, and 4 days. Marcus stood up and moved to a small cooking unit. Are you hungry? I don't have much, but I've been growing some mushrooms. They're actually pretty good once you get used to them. But I managed to grab a lot of supplies before it broke apart completely. He stirred something in a small pot. I've been surviving on what I can find and what I can grow. She noticed the cushions were made from salvaged seat padding, carefully sewn together. You should rest more, Marcus said. You were in bad shape when I found you. Your suit had multiple cracks and you had some injuries. I did what I could, but I'm not a doctor. Marcus walked over to a small computer tablet and pulled up a screen. Well, first I had to figure out what you needed. Your species isn't in my basic database, so I had to improvise. I found some fragments of medical information in an old galactic database I downloaded a while back. Did you know you can find amazing things in deleted file sectors? It displayed Valkyrian anatomy diagrams, basic chemical composition data, and medical notes. The information was incomplete and outdated, but it was something. I used this to create a breathable atmosphere in here, Marcus continued. Your species needs more nitrogen than humans and less oxygen. I also had to adjust the temperature. You guys like it cooler than we do. Then I treated your injuries. You had a cut on your arm and some bruised ribs. I used a universal tissue bonding gel I had in my medical kit. It's supposed to work on most carbon-based life forms. I figured doing something was better than doing nothing. The Valkyrian way was to gather all available information, calculate the optimal solution, and then act. But she was alive. His improvised, illogical approach had worked. Why are you still here? Kurazeth asked. 3 months is a long time. Why haven't you accepted the situation? He looked almost sad. Is that what you were doing when I found you, just accepting death? Maybe it's a human thing, but we don't really do that. We keep trying. Even when the odds are terrible, even when logic says it's hopeless, we keep fighting. Sometimes we call it stubbornness, sometimes we call it hope. No, Marcus agreed, but it's kept me alive for 3 months, and it's why I ran 3 miles to pull you out of a crashed ship. It was considered a cognitive bias that interfered with clear thinking. Marcus stood up and returned to his cooking. Anyway, I'm glad I found you. It gets pretty lonely out here. I've been talking to myself for weeks. My ship's AI would be so disappointed. She always said I talked too much. Humans formed emotional attachments to their artificial intelligences. Another thing her people found inefficient, but humans seemed to consider natural. The good news, Marcus said, returning to his cheerful tone, is that your ship might be repairable. I haven't done a full scan yet, but from what I saw, the hull is damaged, but the core systems might be intact. If we can fix it, we might be able to get off this moon. You've got engineering knowledge, and I've got salvage experience. Together, we might actually have a chance. Kurazeth calculated the actual probability of successfully repairing her ship with limited resources and no proper facilities. The number was extremely low, but Marcus was already making plans, already moving forward, already refusing to give up. For the first time in her life, Kurazeth wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was something valuable in the human way of thinking, something that mathematics couldn't capture. 2 days had passed since Kurazeth woke up in Marcus's shelter. She was feeling stronger now, though her ribs still hurt when she moved too quickly. The human's improvised medical treatment had worked better than she expected. She spent the first day mostly resting and observing Marcus. He was constantly busy. He checked his water collection system, tended to his mushroom garden, repaired a broken power converter, and organized his supplies. He talked while he worked, explaining what he was doing even when she didn't ask. The key to surviving here is routine, Marcus said as he adjusted some panels on the shelter's roof. I wake up at the same time every day. I check the systems, eat breakfast, work on whatever project needs attention, exercise for an hour, then more work in the afternoon. It keeps me sane. On the second day, Marcus helped her walk outside for the first time. She wore one of his spare environmental suits, modified to fit her smaller frame. The suit was covered with patches and repairs, but it worked. They walked slowly toward her crashed ship. Kurazeth was shocked by how far Marcus had carried her. The terrain was rough, covered with sharp rocks and steep slopes. Carrying an unconscious person across this distance while sharing oxygen must have been extremely difficult. "Weren't you afraid?" she asked. When you were carrying me, the oxygen could have run out for both of us. The logical response to fear was to avoid the danger or calculate safer options. They reached her ship. In daylight, it looked even worse than she remembered. The hull was torn in several places. One engine was completely destroyed. The cockpit was crushed on one side. Marcus walked around the ship, examining it carefully. He pulled out a small scanning device and took readings from different sections. Kurazeth watched him work. His movements were confident and practiced. He clearly knew what he was doing. Okay, Marcus said after 20 minutes. The good news is that your main reactor is still intact. The power cells are drained but not damaged. Your navigation computer is probably fine. It's in the protected core section. The bad news is pretty much everything else. Could be higher if we get lucky with the parts I've collected. That was unacceptable by Valkyrian standards. They would classify this as a failed project and move to alternative solutions. What alternative solutions do we have? She asked. Marcus looked confused. Alternative to what? If the probability is only 20%, we should consider other options. Or we could search for other crashed ships that might have working communication systems. At least with your ship, if we can get it working, we control our own rescue. We're not waiting for someone else. I've been in situations where the numbers said I should fail, but I succeeded anyway. You know why? Because I didn't give up. You couldn't change reality by simply refusing to accept it. That's not how the universe works, she said. Marcus smiled. Maybe not in your experience, but in mine, attitude matters, hope matters. Trying one more time when logic says to quit, that matters. She noticed a small photograph attached to the wall. It showed Marcus with 3 other humans, 2 men and 1 woman. They were all wearing matching uniforms and smiling. Behind them was a ship. That's my crew, Marcus said quietly. He had noticed her looking at the photo. From before. Marcus brought over 2 bowls of food, some kind of mushroom stew with protein supplements mixed in. He sat down across from her. We were a salvage team, 4 of us, best crew in the sector. He stared at his bowl. We got a contract to investigate an old mining station. It was supposed to be empty, completely safe, but there was a structural failure. The main support beam collapsed. I was outside the station at the time, working on the external sensors. They were inside. You survived because you were in a different location. I had to evacuate or die with them. Her people would have acknowledged the loss, calculated the statistical impact, and moved forward. They wouldn't carry the emotional weight for months afterward. Is that why you're out here? She asked. Why you took a solo salvage contract on this moon? I needed time alone to process everything, and I guess I needed to prove to myself that I could still do this job. Marcus laughed bitterly. Then my ship broke down and I got stuck here. The universe has a weird sense of humor. By Valkyrian standards, you should be experiencing severe psychological distress. And now, having someone to talk to who doesn't think I'm crazy for staying positive. Kurazeth found herself thinking about Marcus's story. He had lost everything, his crew, his ship, his career. By any logical assessment, he should have given up. Instead, he built a shelter, grew food, maintained hope. Can I ask you something? Marcus said suddenly. Yes. But we had wars, conflicts, inefficiencies caused by anger, jealousy, fear. Our scientists developed a way to suppress emotional responses through genetic modification and mental training. Within 2 generations, our entire species had changed. We became logical, efficient, peaceful. But you also lost joy, love, the feeling you get when you help someone for no logical reason. Marcus leaned forward. Kurazeth, I'm not trying to criticize your people. I'm genuinely curious. Don't you ever wonder what it would be like to feel things? When she looked at how hard Marcus worked to help her, how much he had risked to save a stranger, she felt something warm in her chest. It wasn't pain or discomfort. It was something else. Something her people had eliminated. Actually, she admitted slowly, I have been experiencing unusual responses since you rescued me. Small things. When you smile, I feel different. When you tell stories about your crew, I feel heaviness. These sensations don't match any logical pattern. Kurazeth, those are emotions. You're feeling emotions. How does it feel? Well, not literally, but you know what I mean. Maybe, she thought, there was something to learn from this illogical human after all. The work on Kurazeth's ship began on the 3rd day. Marcus had gathered an impressive collection of salvaged parts over his 3 months on the moon. He showed Kurazeth his storage area, 3 large containers filled with components from at least a dozen different species technologies. I've got thorium power couplings, Zephyx circuit boards, even some rare Krellian memory cores, Marcus said proudly, sorting through the parts. When you're a salvage operator, you learn to never throw anything away. You never know when you'll need it. Some are really ancient, maybe 100 years old or more. I think this moon was used as a dumping ground for damaged ships at some point. Kurazeth pulled up the ship's diagnostic systems using a portable terminal. The screen showed a long list of damaged systems, failed connections, and depleted power cells. The main engine is completely destroyed, Kurazeth said, analyzing the data. The secondary engine has a 73% chance of being repairable. The navigation system needs 3 specific components that we don't have. The hull breaches need to be sealed with materials we also don't have. According to this analysis, successful repair probability is 11%. This is not encouraging. Let's start with what we can fix and work our way through the problems one at a time. He didn't follow any structured repair protocol. He simply looked at each problem and tried different solutions until something worked. This power relay is fried, Marcus called out from inside the engine. But I can bypass it using this thorium coupling. It's not designed for this system, but if I modify the connection points. But what if I add a frequency converter here? Marcus emerged from the engine, covered in dust, holding a small device. I pulled this from a Zephyx communication system. It's designed to translate signals between different frequencies. If I wire it into the power flow. She was curious to see what would happen. Marcus spent an hour modifying the connection, muttering to himself as he worked. He used parts that weren't designed to work together, creating something completely new. When he finished, he connected the power relay to the ship's diagnostic system. The relay activated. Power flowed through it smoothly with no overload. It worked. How did you know that would work? Kurazeth asked, genuinely confused. I didn't know. I just thought it might, Marcus grinned. Sometimes you have to try things that don't make sense on paper. You'd be surprised how often it works out. Kurazeth would analyze the issue, calculate the proper solution, and often conclude that repair was impossible with available resources. Marcus would look at the same problem and find a creative workaround that shouldn't work but somehow did. When the navigation system needed a specific memory chip they didn't have, Marcus wired together 3 smaller chips from different systems to create the needed capacity. When the hull needed specialized sealing compound, he mixed materials from 4 different sources to create something that performed the same function. This is completely illogical, Kurazeth said as she watched Marcus create a replacement sensor using parts from a food processing unit, a medical scanner, and a broken communications array. Yeah, probably, but will it work? Kurazeth found herself both frustrated and impressed. Marcus's approach violated every principle of proper engineering she had learned. He didn't follow specifications. He didn't use approved materials. He combined technologies in ways that manufacturers would never recommend. But it worked. Everything he improvised actually worked. How do you learn this skill? She asked during their lunch break. They sat in the shade of the ship eating Marcus's mushroom stew. What skill? This ability to make solutions from impossible situations. We see a problem and we figure out a way around it. My grandfather used to say, if you can't go through the door, try the window. If the window's locked, check the chimney. There's always another way. You just have to be willing to look for it. But Marcus approached problems like puzzles, each one unique, each one requiring creative thinking. My people would consider your methods dangerous, she said. Are they working? Come on, let's tackle the power cell problem next. Without proper power cells, the ship couldn't maintain life support or engine function during flight. We need Valkyrian C-class power cells, Kurazeth explained. They're designed specifically for our ship systems. No other type will work. The ship systems are calibrated to this exact output. Too little power and critical systems won't function. I've got 6 different types here. None of them are strong enough alone, but if we connect them in a network. They have incompatible interfaces. Look, if we create a central regulation system here and connect each cell type through individual converters, then combine the outputs through a distribution hub. The design was incredibly complex and used principles from at least 5 different technological systems. It shouldn't work. The probability of stable operation was less than 30%. But as she studied it more carefully, she began to see the logic in his illogical approach. Each converter would handle the specific quirks of its cell type. The regulation system would smooth out variations. The distribution hub would provide stable output regardless of the source complexity. It was brilliant and completely insane. This might actually work, she admitted. Of course it will work. I haven't been wrong yet today. Marcus winked at her. They spent the next several hours building Marcus's power system. It required precise calibration and careful assembly. Kurazeth found herself enjoying the work. Marcus's enthusiasm was contagious. He talked constantly while they worked, telling stories about his salvage operations, his crew, and the strange things he had discovered in abandoned ships. One time, we found a Krellian vessel that had been drifting for 50 years, Marcus said as he connected another converter. The crew had left personal items everywhere, photos, journals, even a collection of hand-carved wooden sculptures. Someone on that crew was an artist. I kept one of the sculptures. It's a bird-like creature, really beautiful. It was on my ship when it broke down, probably just space dust now. Every wreck we salvaged used to be someone's home, someone's workplace, someone's dream. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I guess that's another human thing. We attach meaning to objects. They become more than just atoms and molecules. The photograph in Marcus's shelter, it was just paper and ink, but it carried meaning beyond its physical form. It represented memory, connection, loss. She was experiencing these concepts herself. When she looked at the ship they were repairing together, it wasn't just metal and circuits anymore. It was hope. It was possibility. It was the result of Marcus's determination and her growing belief that maybe, just maybe, they could succeed. The system is complete, Kurazeth announced as she connected the final converter. Marcus activated the power network. They both watched the diagnostic screen carefully. The readings fluctuated for a moment, then stabilized. Power flowed steadily at exactly 2.7 gigawatts. It worked perfectly. We did it, Marcus shouted, pumping his fist in the air. That's 3 major systems repaired. We're actually making progress. We're making progress. Marcus's hands were warm and his excitement was genuine. She found herself smiling back at him. The probability has increased to 27%, she said. See, we're getting better odds already. Marcus released her hands but continued grinning. And we're not even halfway done. By the time we finish, I bet we'll have a 50-50 chance. Maybe better. Come on, let's head back to the shelter. We've earned a rest. Tomorrow we'll tackle the hull breaches. Human thinking focused on what was possible. The difference seemed small, but perhaps it was everything. Marcus had shown her that impossible things could happen if someone was willing to try. That creativity and determination could overcome mathematical odds. Perhaps humans weren't illogical after all. Perhaps they simply operated on a different kind of logic, one that her people had forgotten when they eliminated emotion and hope, one that might be exactly what she needed to survive. 5 days had passed since they started repairing the ship. Kurazeth and Marcus had fallen into a comfortable working rhythm. They would start early, work through the morning on the ship, take a break for lunch, then continue until the light faded. The ship was coming together slowly. They had repaired 3 major systems, sealed 2 of the hull breaches, and restored partial power to the navigation computer. Marcus's improvised solutions continued to work better than they had any right to. Kurazeth found herself changing in ways she couldn't fully understand. She laughed now, actually laughed, at Marcus's jokes. She felt excitement when they solved a problem. She experienced satisfaction when a repair worked correctly. These emotions were becoming stronger each day. She also felt something else, something that troubled her deeply: fear. Not the logical assessment of danger that Valkyrians experienced. This was different. This was a cold, tight feeling in her chest when she thought about things going wrong, about the ship failing, about being stuck here forever, about losing Marcus. That last thought disturbed her most of all. Why should she fear losing someone she had known for less than 2 weeks? It made no logical sense. Yet the fear was real and growing stronger. On the sixth day, they were working on the ship's exterior hull when the sky began to change. The purple atmosphere turned darker, almost gray. The wind picked up significantly. "That doesn't look good," Marcus said, checking his environmental scanner. "There's a dust storm coming, a big one." Dust whipped around them, making visibility poor. They were halfway back when Marcus stopped suddenly. "The repair equipment, we left the power converter and diagnostic terminal at the ship. If the storm damages them, we won't be able to complete the repairs." "Kurazeth, that's very emotional of you." They made it back to the shelter just as the storm hit with full force. The wind howled outside, shaking the metal walls. Dust hammered against the exterior like rain. Through the small window, they could barely see 3 feet outside. "How long will this last?" Kurazeth asked. Marcus checked his weather data. "Based on previous storms I've tracked, probably 2 days, maybe 3. Marcus kept busy maintaining equipment and organizing supplies. Kurazeth tried to do the same, but she found herself distracted. She kept thinking about the ship, about their progress, about how close they had come to finishing the repairs. If the storm damaged their work, they would have to start over. Some things might be irreparable. The probability of success was dropping with every hour the storm continued. "You're worried," Marcus said that evening as they ate dinner. "I'm calculating potential damage scenarios. I calculated probabilities and acted accordingly. Now I calculate the same probabilities, but I also feel distressed by them. It's inefficient. Wouldn't it be better to simply know the facts without the emotional component? When I worry about you getting hurt, that's because I care about you. When I feel happy that we're making progress, that's because our success matters to me personally, not just logically. The storm will do what it does regardless of how we feel about it. Feelings give us motivation beyond simple survival calculations." He spent extra time making sure each system was perfect. She had thought this was wasteful, but perhaps it was driven by his emotional investment in their success. On the second day of the storm, Marcus's scanner picked up movement outside. The storm had lessened slightly, enough to see through the dust. Something was out there near the ship. "What is that?" Kurazeth asked, looking at the screen. "The storm must have exposed some of the older wrecks buried in the dust." "That's debris being blown around." Marcus watched the screen carefully. "Oh no." They could hear the distant sounds of impact even through the shelter walls and the howling wind. When the storm finally cleared on the third day, they rushed to the ship immediately. What they found made Kurazeth's chest hurt in a way she had never experienced before. The damage was extensive. One of the hull breaches they had sealed was torn open again. The power converter they had left outside was destroyed. Worst of all, the main engine compartment, where they had spent days installing Marcus's improvised power system, had been struck by a large piece of debris. The entire compartment was crushed. Marcus stood silently, staring at the damage. For the first time since Kurazeth met him, he looked defeated. Kurazeth pulled out her diagnostic tablet and assessed the situation. The numbers were clear and devastating. "The damage has destroyed 6 days of work," she said quietly. "With the power system destroyed and the additional hull damage, the probability of successful repair has dropped to 12%. That's really low." She felt anger at the storm, at the moon, at the universe for being so unfair. She felt fear that they would never escape, that Marcus would give up, that she would lose him. But most of all, she felt something else. Something that Valkyrians had eliminated because it was considered the most illogical emotion of all. Hope. 12% is not 0%, Kurazeth said. Marcus looked at her in surprise. "You taught me that," she continued. "As long as the probability is above 0, there's a chance. We can rebuild the power system. We can reseal the hull. We can try again. You've shown me that humans fight even when logic says to stop. You've demonstrated that determination can overcome probability. And now, when things are difficult, you're going to give up. And now, you carried me while sharing your oxygen when the probability of both of us surviving was minimal. You built a shelter, grew food, and maintained hope for 3 months alone on this moon. And you're telling me that 12% is too low." Then slowly he smiled. "When did you become the optimistic one?" "I'm afraid of being stuck here. I'm sad about the damage. But I also care about you, and I'm not going to watch you give up." "Why else would I feel this terrible when you're sad?" "It's very annoying, actually." They spent the rest of the day assessing the damage more carefully and making plans. The work would be difficult, but it was possible. As they worked, Kurazeth realized something important. Emotions did hurt. Fear, sadness, worry, they were all painful in their own ways. But they also made her feel more alive than she ever had. And they made her want to fight harder, to try more, to refuse to accept defeat. Marcus had been right. Emotions weren't just inefficient additions to logic. They were what made the impossible possible. They were what turned a 12% chance into something worth fighting for. That night, as they ate dinner in the shelter, Marcus raised his cup of water. To 12%. And to humans who don't know when to quit. Marcus and Kurazeth worked from early morning until late evening, only stopping for brief meals. The setback from the storm had made them both more determined. On the fourth day, as they were installing the final power converter, Marcus's scanning device detected something unusual. "That's weird," he said, looking at the screen. "There's a strong energy signature about 2 miles east of here." "That shouldn't be possible. This moon is supposed to be uninhabited. And it's generating power, a lot of power. We could have full power for the launch sequence. Even if we can't use the power, it's worth investigating." "The facility should be just beyond this canyon," Marcus said, checking his scanner. As they descended into the canyon, Kurazeth noticed something odd about the rock formations. They were too regular, too symmetrical. "Marcus, these aren't natural formations. According to this, they're at least 200 years old." Others still showed hints of their original purpose, testing platforms, observation posts, and containment facilities. "I think I know what this place is," Marcus said slowly. "This is an old weapons testing ground. These structures were for testing military equipment and defense systems." "Look there." "That's our power source," Marcus said. "If we can get inside, we might be able to tap into it." Emergency lights provided dim illumination. Control panels lined the walls, most dark but some still functioning. This place must have had an incredibly efficient power system to still be running after 200 years, Kurazeth observed. Marcus was examining one of the active control panels. "Look at this. It's a fusion reactor, but not any design I've seen before. It's completely automated and self-maintaining." He pulled out his scanning device. "The reactor is in the lower levels. If we can reach it, we can connect our power cells directly." In the center of the chamber sat the reactor, a massive cylindrical device covered in conduits and control systems. Power flowed through it steadily, feeding systems throughout the facility. "This is perfect," Marcus said, approaching the reactor. "I can set up a transfer system here. With this much power, we could fully charge the ship's cells in just a few hours." Multiple systems are running. There are automated defense drones patrolling the facility. They're in standby mode right now, but if we start interfacing with the reactor, we might trigger them. Information scrolled across the screen. The defense system is programmed to prevent unauthorized access to the reactor. Any attempt to modify or connect to it will activate the drones. But it would take time, at least 2 hours to break through the security protocols. And there's a 73% chance that attempting an override would trigger the defenses immediately. What if we work with it instead? The system recognizes authorized personnel through identification codes. We don't have those codes. Forge them somehow. 200 years ago, encryption technology was much simpler. Marcus was getting excited. If we can decode the authentication pattern, we can generate our own access codes. Kurazeth used her knowledge of ancient computer systems to analyze the encryption. Marcus used his improvisation skills to test different approaches. "I think I found something," Kurazeth said finally. "The authentication system uses a rotating cipher based on the facility's power output. If I can calculate the current cipher key." "Got it," Kurazeth announced. "I can generate temporary access codes. They'll only last for about 4 hours before the cipher rotates again, but that should be enough time. Once we have access codes, we can connect to the reactor without triggering the defenses. I need to physically access it to input the codes and authorize our presence. That's a long way through corridors that might have drones patrolling them. Here's what I'm thinking. You go to the control room and input the codes. I stay here with the reactor. Once you've authorized us, I can immediately start the power transfer. We'll save time that way." If something goes wrong and the drones activate, you'll be trapped here alone. 2 people can handle problems better than 1. We'll move through the facility carefully, reach the control room, input the codes, then both come back here to set up the power transfer. Marcus's scanner showed 3 drones patrolling different sections of the facility. They would need to avoid all of them. The journey through the facility was tense. They moved slowly through dim corridors, stopping frequently to check for drones. Twice they had to hide in side rooms while drones passed nearby. The machines were old but still functional, floating spheres covered in sensors and mechanical arms. They reached the control room after 30 minutes of careful navigation. Kurazeth accessed the main terminal and began inputting her codes. The process took several minutes while Marcus stood guard at the door. "Almost done," Kurazeth said, typing rapidly. "Just need to confirm the authorization and—" Red lights began flashing throughout the facility. "What happened?" Marcus asked. "I don't know, the system is rejecting the codes." Kurazeth worked frantically, trying to understand what went wrong. The cipher rotated early. "My calculations were off by. I'm shutting down power to the drone charging stations. That should disable them. They're returning to their charging stations. Without the drones active, the reactor is accessible. The facility's security is offline now. We can connect directly." Marcus set up the power transfer system while Kurazeth monitored the reactor output. "This is going to work," Marcus said as he connected the final cable to their portable power cells. "Look at this energy flow. We'll have full charge in 3 hours. They're good. I provide tactical analysis. Together, we solve problems neither of us could solve alone." These human concepts that she was learning to understand and value. Marcus. The ship was ready. After 2 weeks of work, countless improvised solutions, and one devastating setback, Kurazeth's vessel was finally prepared for launch. Marcus had installed the fully charged power cells from the ancient facility. Every system had been tested multiple times. The hull was sealed, the engines were functional. "All systems show green," Kurazeth said, reading the diagnostic panel inside the cockpit. "Navigation is online, life support is stable. Engine power is at 93% of optimal capacity. The hull patches are holding perfectly." "Are you ready?" Kurazeth asked, Marcus strapped into the co-pilot's seat. "As ready as I'll ever be, let's get off this moon." Through the view screen, they could see dust being blown away by the engine thrust. "Engine power at 50%, Kurazeth announced. 60%, 70%. They rose above the gray landscape, leaving the crash site and Marcus's shelter behind. The purple sky grew darker as they climbed higher. 85%, 90%. Kurazeth's hands moved across the controls with practiced precision. "We're approaching escape velocity." Warning lights flashed on the panel. "What was that?" Marcus asked. Kurazeth checked the readings. "Minor power fluctuation in the improvised converter system. It's compensating, stabilizing now." 10,000 meters, 15,000. Kurazeth allowed herself a small smile. "We've achieved escape velocity, we're free." 12% probability, we beat those odds." The computer calculated the safest path, and she adjusted their trajectory accordingly. They were halfway through the debris field when Marcus's scanner showed something unexpected. "Kurazeth, I'm detecting multiple ships approaching. Big ones." 6 large vessels were appearing on the edge of scanner range, moving toward them at high speed. The computer identified them immediately. "Those are Valkyrian Explorer fleet ships," Kurazeth said, surprised. "They're searching for me." "They're here to rescue you." A communication request came through immediately. Kurazeth accepted it. The face of Commander Telvaris appeared on the screen. He was an older Valkyrian with the crystalline skin typical of their species. His expression showed the minimal emotion characteristic of their people, mild surprise and calculated relief. "Scout Pilot Kurazeth, we have been searching for you for 2 weeks. Your survival probability was calculated at less than 1%. This outcome is unexpected. He saved my life and helped me repair my ship. That facility is 14 days travel from our current position. The humans' preferences are not a priority factor. I have important information regarding my survival that the fleet leadership needs to hear." These were the senior leaders of the Explorer fleet, responsible for all major decisions. They looked at Kurazeth with analytical interest. Council leader Marathos spoke first. "Scout pilot Kurazeth, explain your survival." The data indicated 0 probability of rescue, given the debris field interference and toxic moon environment. He carried me 3 miles while sharing his own oxygen supply. He improvised medical treatment for my injuries despite having no knowledge of Valkyrian physiology. He helped me repair my ship using salvaged parts and creative engineering solutions. Everything I am about to tell you contradicts our understanding of efficient behavior, but it is the truth. By our calculations, he should have accepted his fate and entered peaceful stasis. Instead, he built a shelter. He created systems to grow food and collect water. He maintained hope that rescue would come, despite all probability indicating otherwise. Marcus's refusal to accept logical defeat led him to explore the moon, which led him to discover salvageable parts, which led him to find me. His illogical optimism created a chain of events that resulted in both our survivals. More importantly, he demonstrated something our people eliminated 300 years ago. When faced with ship repairs that had only 12% success probability, he didn't calculate the efficiency of attempting them. He simply tried anyway. His emotional investment in our success made him work harder, think more creatively, and refuse to give up. Together, we combined human intuition with Valkyrian precision and achieved what neither of us could alone. Your survival is statistically anomalous. However, this does not prove emotional responses are superior to logical thinking. Marcus Chen represents what humans call the human variable, their stubborn, illogical refusal to accept defeat. Throughout the galaxy, humans are becoming essential partners not because they're the strongest or smartest, but because they bring something other species lack: hope. Determination, the ability to see possibility where others see only probability. Furthermore, I request that the Council consider studying human cognitive approaches. We might learn something valuable. You may escort him to Station Kepler 7 directly. As for studying human approaches, he paused. Your own transformation is noteworthy, Scout Pilot. You display emotional responses that should be impossible given your genetic modifications. This alone warrants investigation. Or perhaps extreme circumstances can trigger responses we thought were eliminated. Either way, I'm evidence that emotions can coexist with rational thought. Upon your return, you will present a full analysis of human problem-solving methodologies to the research division. If there is value in this human variable, we will determine it through proper study. Kurazeth turned to Marcus, who had been listening quietly. "Well," he said with a grin, "that went better than I expected. You basically just told your entire leadership that being friends with a human taught you emotions. That humans have something valuable to offer the galaxy. That hope and determination matter. And I am living proof that your approach works." It was the logical thing to do. As they traveled through space, Kurazeth thought about everything that had happened. She had closed her eyes to die on that moon, accepting her calculated fate with Valkyrian dignity. Then she had opened them to see a human holding her, a human who refused to accept what mathematics said was inevitable. Marcus had taught her that impossibilities could become possible, that emotions weren't weaknesses but strengths. That sometimes the most illogical choice was the right one. And perhaps, just perhaps, humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't their technology or their resources. It was their stubborn, wonderful refusal to let hope die, even when all the numbers said it should. "Hey," Marcus said, interrupting her thoughts, "what are you going to do when you get back to your people?" "And I'm going to make sure others understand what I learned from you. The human variable."